But I wouldn't be the one to say that. I was being in a position, of course. But he trained as a surgeon, and in 1931 there was a cholera epidemic in Newcastle, which gave him perhaps some experience of cholera as a disease. In 1936 he went down to London, where he became an anaesthetist. In those days doctors did almost anything, and a number of them became expert in several fields. So he went down to London as an anaesthetist, and in 1949 this letter appeared in the Times. You might just like to read it. The spelling is as it was. You might like to read that. And that's what London was like in those days. And it's fascinating that whoever wrote that letter somehow made a connection between cholera and the conditions in which they were living. Because in those days they thought cholera came through the air. Now, John Snow had his doubts about that. This business of coming through the air was what they called miasmatism. They thought there was a miasma in the air, a bad sort of odour or spirit in the air from which people caught disease. But he felt this was not really logical, because cholera affects the intestines, and therefore it seemed unlikely to be coming from the air, much likely to come from something that people swallowed. So in 1949 he wrote a paper in which he suggested that cholera came in through water. And he noticed that in London the incidence of cholera was related to where people got their water supply from. Those who got it from north of London, upstream, were relatively free of cholera compared with those who got their water from downstream. And you can imagine that had much more in the way of sewage in it. In 1854 there was a major cholera epidemic, and he noted that the local prison, normally not known to its healthy environment, was relatively free of cholera, and they got their water from a well in the prison and not from the local pump. And he found that within 10 days there were 500 cases related to one pump in London, and he found that there was water from sewerage trickling down into the well from which the pump drew its water. And there's a picture of one of these pumps, how they worked. Note the long handle on the pump. And later a map was drawn of where these cases were, and within the little red square was the pump, and you can see how the cholera cases were all clustered around the pump. So what did he do? He removed the handle. And the cholera epidemic came to an abrupt halt. Some people say it was declining before that, but certainly when the handle was removed, it stopped. And thus was public health born. And it was regarded as a great advance in the understanding of the pattern of disease. Now, John Snow himself was teetotal, but that didn't stop them from naming the local pub next to the pump after John Snow. So that's enough about John Snow, but water and health really became linked at that time from understanding that. Right, now I'm going to hand over to... Now, wait a minute, how do I get this shut on?
Sarah, just whilst you're doing that,
yes.
Are we also going to make the link with the Ozilgetti family, who produced the Victorian tunnels, the water system that still exists in the City of London?
I wonder if we could reserve that sort of thing. Maybe we want to move on to our main speakers now. Thank you. After our speakers, we're going to have questions.
Okay.
I'm really just introducing the topic. We're going to have questions of fact or clarification, and at the end, free to make any contribution you like during the discussion. So I'm going to hand over to our first very distinguished speaker, Sir Derek Wanless. His biographical details are in your pack, but I just can't resist reading out to you a quote that I found, which will endear him to the hearts of many in the audience tonight. Crude, bureaucratic, administrative systems corrode professionalism. And wouldn't we like to quote that quite widely to a lot of other people? So Derek, over to you. Now let's put your PowerPoint up.
Yeah, thanks.
This top one, isn't it? Slides, there we are. Okay,
Fine,
that's right. That little arrow will move the slides.
okay. And sometimes I have to deny quotes, but I can say that was absolutely true. I've used it many times in speeches, but not tonight. I think I was asked to set the scene tonight, because I've got two hats on really. One is the hat as Chairman of Northumbrian Water, and the other one is as the writer of what turned out eventually to be 4 reports, 2 for government and 2 for the King's Fund, between 2002 and 2007, looking at health, first of all, at public health, then at social care, and then at how well was the health service doing along the path that had been laid out in the first report in 2002. So the good news from my point of view is I think the two hats are remarkably compatible. There's no problem to wear the two at the same time. The first report, I was asked to look at what resources were required to run health services in the UK in 20 years' time. 2022 was the time that I was given. The conclusion was it depends. Of course, it's a long time to make forecasts. What does it depend on? It depends on, for example, demographics. They were reasonably clear, or looked clear if there's no major catastrophe. And also it depended on the pace of medical technologies, and that was less clear, but you could make assumptions about that. Two things that were particularly unclear were productivity and prevention. And productivity meant what bang for the buck does the health service get out of money it spends. Prevention was the interesting piece which got me involved in public health. It was how engaged will people become in looking at their own health status or the population's health status. Research, education, many levers were available to government to try and change the health of the population, and that's what we were looking at. But let me make my view of that tonight quite clear. When we had the email in Northumbria Water, it was to talk about the value of water and whether it was good for you was the question. Well, all the emails which go out from Northumbrian Water contain be generous with the water you drink, it's good for your health. So I suppose we've nailed our colours very firmly to a mast right at the outset. But take care of the water you use, it's a precious resource, don't waste it. So that's on all of our emails, and that's very much the the text for the evening, if I can use it that way. I'll leave the rest up so you can read all the good bits underneath as well, but I shan't read them out. So the question is, water good for our health can be addressed at a number of levels. It can be addressed at population level, at individual level. And before we start talking about it, I'd just like to show 1 or 2 slides that come courtesy of WaterAid. WaterAid's a charity which was set up by the UK water industry in 1981. And its vision is clear: to transform lives by improving access to safe water, hygiene and sanitation in the world's poorest communities. So, for example, in Malawi, in southern Africa, and indeed you'll see later in many parts of the world, there's a great deal that needs to be done. If you look at the demographics of Malawi, they're very different from the demographics I was looking at in terms of the UK in the health studies. Average life expectancy in Malawi is about 52. These are, depending on how well the statistics are collected. Annual income, £329 was the estimate that was made. A bit of spurious accuracy in that, I have to say. The interesting thing is how much different it is to ours. The chances of a child dying before the age of 5, 7 in 1,000 in the UK, it's about 1 in 6 in Malawi. So some very, very different figures from the ones that we see. And of course there are